All right, I have 4:15. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would you please rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Sam Martin.
Here.
Bob Freeman. Here. And Rick Morgan's here. Keeping with our agenda, we have a short public input before we move into the red folder. Public input. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As some of you, first of all, Jim Fitzpatrick, I'm here to talk about the beach proposal, and in particular, a statement in the Independent last week concerning a letter that the Executive Committee of the Broad-Levitt Bay Association sent to the Independent the prior week, encouraging people to vote yes on the beach proposal. Last week in the Independent, there was a clarification for that letter, and the clarification in effect said that I had lied, that the members of the Executive Committee had approved the letter. As a matter of fact, several members of the Executive Committee helped me write the letter, and all 7 of the Executive Committee approved. Turns out that some unscrupulous persons too, had corresponded with the Independent and said that that the letter that had been previously sent supporting the beach were just my views and not the views of the Executive Committee. Well, I wasn't very happy with that. So I have been communicating with the editor of the Independent. If it's okay with you, I'll read the editorial that will appear this week in this week's Independent. When controversy gets carried away, that's going to be the headline. Few issues in recent memory have sparked quite as much controversy as a proposal by Ossipee's Board of Selectmen to purchase a piece of lakefront property at Camp Secaucus for use in a town beach, as a town beach. Since the board first brought its plan forward months ago, our inbox has been teeming with letters to the editor from community members both for and against it. One of those who wrote to us expressing support for the proposal was Jim Fitzpatrick, chairman of the Broad-Levitt Bay Association Executive Committee. In a letter published November 16, Mr. Fitzpatrick wrote that he and his fellow members of the Executive Committee felt a new town beach was an investment that would pay dividends for Ossipee in years to come. Following the publication of Mr. Fitzpatrick's letter, we began receiving emails from other members of the Executive Committee, which is not true, claiming that the opinions he expressed were his own and that he had taken it upon himself to speak out publicly on the committee's behalf without its blessing. Since these claims came from multiple individuals identifying themselves as committee members, we felt that it would be in the best interest of our readers in Ossipee to publish a clarification stating that questions had been raised about the manner in which Mr. Fitzpatrick represented himself. It was not our intention to smear his reputation or to brand him a liar. As we stated in the clarification that appeared in last week's edition of the Independent, it is impossible to know for certain whether or not the claims made by members of the committee are true because we were not privy to any discussions that might have been taking place among them concerning the beach proposal. We simply felt that given the controversial nature of the beach proposal and the fact that the town meeting vote on it was less than a week out at that point, readers who might have intended to base their view on the opinions of Mr. Fitzpatrick expressed in his letter deserve to know that he may not have had the executive committee's permission to speak for them. While our hearts were in the right place, it appears that we have allowed ourselves to get swept up in the controversy at Mr. Fitzpatrick's expense. In the wake of last week's clarification, he reached out to us, quite understandably upset, and was able to provide evidence that the 6 other members of the executive committee drafted the letter together with him and did so with the overwhelming support of the association's membership, who were polled during the annual meeting in July. And I had mentioned that Mr. Morgan had spoken to us about the beach, and that in the vote, everybody agreed, everyone, that that was a good idea. Okay, let me go back now. Whoop, I should have made a point of this where I was at. We were under the mistaken impression that the disgruntled individuals who contacted us, happened to be one couple, to contest Mr. Fitzpatrick's letter were members of the executive committee, but that does not appear to be the case. It seems that they are, in fact, members of the association who tried to promote their view of the beach proposal as an ill-advised expense by depicting Mr. Fitzpatrick's letter as deceitful. We also regret that our clarification concerning Mr. Fitzpatrick's letter was used to rake him over the coals on social media by individuals within the community who feel that they have an axe to grind against him, and we wish to take this opportunity to apologize to him for any personal distress he may have suffered as a result of our erroneous appraisal of the situation. We hope that the vote on the town beach, which took place after our press deadline for this week's edition, because it won't go in until Thursday, now behind us, the tempers and tensions on either side of the debate that led to the predicament in which Mr. Fitzpatrick found himself will die down. We understand that those on both sides are emotionally invested in the respective arguments, but at the end of the day, no crimes were committed here, and no one was harmed, at least not physically. I thought that was ironic. I think it was illegal, if not highly unethical. We hope the situation gives our readers pause in the future before posting derogatory comments about another person to an online blog or social media site. Mr. Fitzpatrick, a longtime Rotarian, told us that he has always taken Rotary motto, service above self, to heart, along with its 4-part litmus test, which poses the following questions in relation to any claim. 1, is it the truth? 2, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it be beneficial? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? And 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? In the future, we here at the Independent will try to do our best to ascribe to the same standard. So, I thank you for letting me read this. I'm looking forward to seeing it in the Independent on Thursday, and I would like to read it tomorrow as well.
As Jim is, you and I have talked as well, I think you should. And for a brief period of time, you were maybe you even had more nasty comments about you on social media than I did.
There was a lot of bad stuff on social media.
But to be perfectly honest, I think I've passed you again quite quickly, so. It goes it goes with the territory, and unfortunately, you're right. I mean, I went to the annual meeting back in July, answered a lot of questions, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was overwhelmingly supported by the members that were there. And
100%.
There were, how many people were at your annual meeting? There was
45.
45 people from the Broad and Level Bay Association, which is a pretty good sized gathering.
Right.
Especially
Especially at the end of July on a nice, warm, sunny day.
it was overwhelmingly supported by them, so I was very, pleased as a proponent of this to get the letter from the association. We ultimately received an endorsement, as you well know, also from the Ossipee Lake Alliance on the plan. But it is unfortunate that some people, rather than, and I guess it's the oldest play in the book, when you can't defeat the message, you attack the messenger. That is a sad but true fact. You know, I've got, after having been a police officer for 28 years, I've got broad shoulders, and there's not much they can call me that they haven't called me before.
Well, that's,
But,
yeah.
you know, pointing to your Rotarian motto, and I would simply ask people to ask themselves if they ever done anything for the greater good. I've made this clear over and over and over again that beach going is not my thing. You will never see me down there. But for those who haven't done something for the greater good, they've missed an opportunity to feel really good about themselves. I look at this as being about the identity of the town. And yes, do I want my children and my grandchildren and future generations to be able to enjoy a beach? Yes, I do. But this isn't personal to me. Rick Morgan has no vested interest in this one way or the other than we've invested a lot of effort. And now it is for the voters to decide. On to the Independent, and I'm not going to belabor this. The article that was in this week's Independent, it's hard for me to even rationalize what was said. I have been at every town meeting for the last 37 years except for one. Never, ever have part-time residents spoken at town meeting. The article in this week's Independent would make readers believe, who do not know better, that they've always been allowed to speak, and that Rick Morgan, the demon, is going to object to them speaking this year. They have never been allowed to speak at town meeting. The only non-residents, there's two categories of non-residents who have ever been allowed to speak at town meeting. Those representing outside agencies who are seeking funding from the town, therefore have to be able to speak to town meeting to explain why they're getting this funding. And several of our town employees, such as our public works director, our town administrator, who are not Ossipee residents, they are allowed to speak so that they can answer questions to help the Ossipee voters decide the pertinent issues. Part-time residents, and in particular, seasonal campers, have never, ever spoken at an Ossipee town meeting. Again, the article would have you believe that we're breaking some long-standing tradition. The process is that if non-residents want to speak, the moderator will ask if there is an objection. I have made it clear that I, myself, will object to non-residents speaking. That doesn't mean it automatically happens. The moderator will then poll the registered voters here, and they will vote as to whether or not to allow the non-resident to speak. That's a pretty open and forthright process. I intend to object to the non-resident speaking only because, and I have said this in a letter to the editor as well, they have had their voice heard. They have come to the public meetings, they have asked their questions, they've started websites, they've done mailings, they're putting up, they've had their voice. But no, they don't get a vote. I do not want them to be able to dominate the discussion the night of town meeting. That's me. That's my personal opinion. And just like everybody else here, and it's going to be here at that meeting, I get one vote. I'm telling you in advance what I'm going to do, and how the rest of the voters or attendants decide to exercise their right is up to them. The article, I thought, this week, again, was extremely slanted and, quite frankly, atrocious. Going back in this process, one of the first selectmen's meetings when it was actually discussed, there was a lady who was here who started off by saying that she was a local and a taxpayer and spoke at length about the beach, against the proposal. Well, it turns out, while she may have been born locally, she is, in fact, a seasonal camper at Camp Secocas. and paid a total tax bill last year of $133. The newspaper article went at length about what she said and about how much they contribute to the town, and yet sitting about where Ash is now, Dennis Legenda, who is a lifelong Ossipee resident and a homeowner and a taxpayer and has been in his entire life, spoke very strongly in favor of the beach, and his name never even mentioned. Never even mentioned. The newspaper can be an important tool to getting people fair and balanced information so that they can then help to form their own opinion. I respectfully submit that what has been in the Independent on this issue, no matter how it comes up, has been anything but fair and balanced. And I thought it was atrocious, but get used to it.
I'd like to add also that personally, I'm very proud of most of the lakefront owners for supporting this. I think I've received maybe 2 emails with all of my emails to the 241 members of the Broad Levitt Bay Association, and I think 2 have sent me emails saying they don't agree. I haven't received 239 saying they do agree, but my guess is that the majority agree. And I'm very happy that I think that the residents here deserve a beach. This is a great, the thing that's been overlooked is what an asset this is going to be for the town. I mean, you would think that those who are opposed think that nobody's going to use it. Well, let me tell you, I think we all grew up somewhere, someplace, where we had some beach availability in our town or nearby. And not to have a beach on Ossipee Lake for residents is insane, so.
The other thing that I said, it was quoted in this article as well, and you were quoted in this one too, so you're an American comment, and I was quoted when I talked about arrogance in one of my letters. And arrogant might not have been the best word. Maybe it should have been selfish. Now, I don't know that either one of them are less derogatory than the other, but I still believe for those who have been enjoying the lake, Ossipee Lake, to tell the rest of us that we should be satisfied with Duncan Lake. Call it arrogance, call it selfish, call it what you will. I think my point was well made. It wasn't to demonize anybody else, but I think you put yourself in a bad light if you yourself are enjoying the lake and telling the rest of us that we shouldn't even want to. So, anyway.
We need to bring up the majority thing, the vote, about not just a majority, but not just a majority, but like.
Oh yeah, this is not an easy hurdle.
But I'm sure people understand that.
Yeah, the vote tomorrow night, we can talk about it actually farther down the agenda, but it requires a 2/3 majority. So for every 1 no vote, there have to be 2 yes votes. And that's on purpose. The people who set up these laws, however many decades ago, on the big ticket items, so if it's a bond issue of more than $100,000, then it requires a 2/3 majority. And that's because you're tying the town into an agreement that will last for years, and a payment schedule that will last for years. So it requires a 2/3 majority, and it's not an easy hurdle to overcome. Literally for every 1 no vote, there have to be 2 yeses. So it's,
Unlike a simple majority.
unlike a simple majority. So it will depend, tomorrow night's outcome, I firmly believe, will depend on how and who shows up. If the townspeople show up, I think it'll pass by a good margin. If they don't, it'll be whichever side motivated enough to be here. And that's the sad reality of it. So, all right. I'm going to move on to, anybody else have anything under public input? Sorry. You sure? Okay. All right. Joe, anything?
Is this open for anything?
Sure.
Okay. I have a couple of hats I need to ask a couple questions on.
Okay.
First one for the Economic Development Committee.
Yep.
When we invite, or when we have the opportunity to bring new members on, we just wanted to do a clarification of this. Do they need to be appointed by the selectmen, or can those people be appointed by our committee?
I am I don't have any issue with them just being appointed by the committee, other than we obviously would like to be appraised of who's on it.
Oh, sure,
That's,
yeah.
do you have any,
No, is that how it goes?
which one's never really,
Never really.
I think we voted
I think-
to appoint Ash and then.
and
think
then
we
from
got a
there
good
on,
committee
we
that
just
they
kinda
should
let
be
it
able
go.
I think we got a good committee, they should be able to put people on.
So
that
I'd
they-
say just keep us apprised of who you're adding, if that's all right.
The reason we're asking is because we're finally solidifying our bylaws, by the end of the year, our December meeting. So to do that, we just need to finalize that article regarding the appointment of members, whether it has to be selectmen involvement in doing that, or if we can actually vote in our own membership.
I think you should vote them in, and then supply to us that recommendation, which at that point, I believe any board would rubber stamp. I mean, I can't imagine why they would disagree with it, but for purposes of the bylaws in particular, I do think because it is a committee of the town, ultimately, the selectmen need to be at least involved in that process. So I would say vote them on, and then just supply it to us, and, I mean, much like we do with the library. I mean, when the library needs a trustee, they come up with somebody, they submit the letter, and why on earth would we say no, type of thing. So, let's do it that way. Is that all right with you?
It's cool with me.
Then I put the other hat.
Okay.
As far as the Ossipee Conservation Commission. There was a question asked at a couple of the meetings, and I haven't been able to get here, but I just want to double check. Where does the lease stand with as far as the fish hatchery? Has that been,
We're working on it.
okay,
The lease actually is due to expire in 2019.
2019, correct.
It's currently, until 2019, the current lease is.
okay.
And we are in the process, we've had 2 meetings with those folks, the folks that occupy it, and we are negotiating terms for a future lease.
Okay.
As well as we're trying to address some maintenance issues on the property. Okay? That answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I'm gonna bring it back.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else have anything under public input at this point? If not, we'll start our red folder. The first order of business I have, excuse me, I shouldn't have got root beer. I have the minutes of the Selectmen's meeting which occurred on Monday, November 20th. I make a motion we accept the minutes as printed. All in favor? Aye. Bob was absent, so he can't vote. And we have the minutes of the Selectmen's work session which occurred on Monday, November 20th. I make a motion we accept them as printed.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We have the check voucher totals. Payroll for week ending 11/25 with payroll taxes was $49,038.31. We had accounts payable for week ending 11/18 in the amount of $14,734.25, for a total dispersed of $63,772.56. Additionally, we had water and sewer accounts payable in the amount of $22,708.08. I make a motion to sign.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. These are just the check voucher totals. Every bill that comes in initially goes to the department head, where they certify that they received the goods that were being billed for, and they assign which line item in their budget those funds are to be taken from. It then goes to finance and is approved individually by initial of all 3 selectmen. And then it makes it to the voucher totals, which are these. So there is a multi-step process to make sure the money is being dispersed correctly. We have a payroll reimbursement request from the Water and Sewer Department in the amount of $3,151.26. I make a motion we sign it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We have a check that we received from Northeast Recovery for scrap metal, the amount of $234.17. We received a check from the Broad Levitt Bay Association, the amount of $800. This has been an annual donation for quite some time, which we use towards the milfoil treatment in Ossipee Lake. Thank you. We have a cemetery deed purchase of a cemetery lot in Grant Hill. Make a motion, we sign it. All in favor?
Aye.
We have it's not quite the contract, but it's an agreement with Plodzik and Sanders, who is our auditor and has been our auditor for the last several years anyway. And we are entering into an agreement with them to complete our audit for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2017. I make a motion, we sign.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. There's only one place for a signature, but I would suggest you two both initial it as well. We have a copy of the consent calendar from the Executive Council, which is here in the folder if anybody'd like to see it. We have a letter, and this is again in advance of the town meeting tomorrow night, from the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. Pleased to inform you that our loan application has been approved. Preliminary, obviously, and after the amount is settled at town meeting tomorrow night, then it will finalize into a loan agreement. We have the Highway Department work logs for 11/19 to 11/25, 11/12 to 11/18, and 11/5 to 11/11, here in the folder if anybody'd like to look at them. We have a request for abatement, and this is a water and sewer bill. Bo, are you familiar with this? This is from the White Horse Addiction Center. They're looking for an abatement of $930 for water they believe that they were billed for that they did not use.
I worked with them for quite a bit. I installed one new meter, the old style, and they were using this water. We installed a new radio read meter, and for the first week, they were still using that amount of water. Then all of a sudden, it stopped using that amount of water. I don't agree with it. I think that they were using the water.
No, it's pretty easy as far as I'm concerned. If our water and sewer superintendent isn't convinced, I mean, listen, if we billed them for water they didn't use, I want to make that right. But if our water and sewer superintendent is not confident that they didn't use it, then I don't see where we have any business whatsoever in abating. At this point, I'm going to make a motion then that we deny the request for abatement.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Certainly, if more information comes to light on that, keep us appraised. I mean, as I said, we don't want to bill people for what they didn't use, but.
Yeah.
And that concludes the red folder. Whole business, anything, Brad, on the 171 and 28?
No, I did reach out to Mike Dugas last week, on a short week there and stuff, and he hasn't responded back to me yet on, I asked those specific questions if you're still in the schedule for 2018 construction for that, so as soon as I get that, we'll forward it over to you.
Okay, anything on Covered Bridge?
Nope.
Sidewalks, which we're adding back onto our weekly agenda. And I know you haven't had anything, I'm sure you haven't had much of a chance to do anything since last week, but what, I was kind of surprised at the last meeting, because it sounds like there is quite frankly, a path going forward to be able to get the sidewalks, even though it's a state highway, without going through what we were going through before. Is that what you believe is the case?
Yeah, and then in that request that I sent down to Mike Dugas, I also included that part of the question too, besides Route 171 and Route 28 intersection, about the proposed, sidewalk moving forward up here on Main Street in Ossipee and stuff. looking at all the scenarios that we talked about with the, keep them on the state road with the possibility of the town taking the state roads over. You know, look at all the options, just want to sit down at the table and see how it lays out, stuff like that. So that's part of the answer I'm waiting for too from them, so we have reached out.
Listen, I mean, if that can even involve them coming up here, and sitting down in a meeting, I would, let's make that happen. I mean, realistically now, I mean, we gotta get through, we're knee-deep in the budget process, so I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to happen tomorrow, but,
We're ready for warrant articles, so.
well, the warrant article doesn't concern me as much, because we've got very nearly enough in the capital reserve account currently.
Yeah, depending, we're gonna work up a new budget number for what it would actually cost.
You're gonna work up a
and
new
then-
budget number, and you may be a case that we have to add to it, but that's,
It'll be a small amount, yeah.
relatively small amount, which, to be honest with you, I think we ought to add it irregardless, because at some point, we're gonna have sidewalks out here.
Right.
Will it
Sooner
be?
the better.
Well, if we can navigate it without involving the state government as little as possible, then I think you will have it sooner than later. But I still keep pointing back to a covered bridge that has now been 10 years and $2 million and is still not across the river.
You know, that's my pet peeve, I hate
So,
to.
anyway, Ash,
Just a plug on our Envision Night. So the Ossipee Economic Development Council is meeting here at 6 p.m. on January 8th with a rain date or a snow date of the 9th. After one of our members, Phil, met with Brad and Jim, we now have copies of the old proposed plan of sidewalks. So we're going to have those up for people to see, give ideas on that night. So we hope people will come up and join us in that.
and I still have the town beach on the agenda. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to add. I simply want people to come. Whether they vote yes or no is up to them. Obviously, I hope they'll vote yes. I still come back to that, what this board has done and all this board has done is secured an opportunity for the voters to decide. I believe it is a vote of historic significance. When you start to think about, and I'm quite frankly a little bit amazed, in 2017, we're even debating whether or not Ossipee residents ought to have access to Ossipee Lake. But we are. When it comes to sites, this site checks off all the boxes. And they are, I don't even want to say rare, they are virtually non-existent to replicate.
I do not believe
It's
there'll be
not-
another chance at it.
It's not just about having a strip of sand. It's about parking and it's about access. And, one of the things that we were beat up on, I was beat up on a lot, you too, some, is this whole prospect of this small piece of land which was offered to us for free. It isn't adequate. And it's not only not adequate, it would
Not accessible.
create a monstrosity of a problem. If you go into the middle of a neighborhood and have a 90-foot strip of sand and room for 15 cars, what do you do when it's July and it's 90 degrees and 30 cars show up? And what do you do when 15 more show up? You'd be talking about people parking in the road, parking in people's driveway, blocking people's driveways. It would be chaotic confrontation, and quite frankly, if I lived down there, I would be as furious as anybody. It's more about, it's as much about, but what makes the site so difficult to find is it's about having a site that has sufficient parking and ease of access. This property checks off all those boxes. I have had conversations with several people who agree that if Ossipee Lake was a blank slate, literally, if there were no camps, no houses on Ossipee Lake, this site would be perfect for a town beach. To have that straight shot from Route 16B down to, good high ground where you can establish parking and still have a swath of land that's 200 feet wide and 450 feet directly to the lake that is completely a blank canvas for recreational use. It literally checks off all the boxes. And I do hope that people will join me in voting yes, not just for today and tomorrow, but literally for generations to come.
I'd like to add one thing to that, Rick. Because I've looked at the site, and for anybody to claim that you could park 36 cars on, between Hudson Road and that, you know, what, no, the water, the wetlands, yeah. Ridiculous. I think the big issue is the fact that if you took the 90 feet, if you took that parcel of land, you're still going to have 24 boat moorings sitting right outside where people are swimming. Absolutely ludicrous and totally unsafe. So,
I actually defer to Jim Ryan's expertise, which he has oodles of in planning. I thought there was only room for 12 cars on that parcel. He was able to come up with room for 15. So I certainly defer to him. He's got more planning experience than virtually anybody that I know of. So it just flat wouldn't suffice. This literally checks off all the boxes, and again, I hope it passes. And
Once you park all those cars, how are you gonna get to the beach? Once you park all those cars, how are you gonna get to the beach? Through the wet?
yeah, well, that was the other part of it, is that
I mean,
there's
there's no way to
get to it.
there's a
Point A to
significant
point B.
amount of
Common
wetland
sense.
between the beach and the 15 parking spaces. When I say wetland, it's not just a few,
No, it's wet.
it's the standing water wet, so
So
it's just
people
not,
would be trespassing
they,
to get
you know,
there.
and I don't, listen, I'm not trying to look a gift horse in the mouth, but there's a reason it was offered for free. Of the property, it's the part of the property that they could sacrifice without being hurt themselves, and that's just the simple truth of it, so. Anyway, come tomorrow night, 6:30, there'll be open discussion, with a chance for questions and answers, and then the polls will open. Once the polls are open, they'll be open for it, they have to be open for at least an hour. I am confident in our moderators, they will not close the polls so long as there are people waiting to vote, but they have to, by law, be open for at least an hour, so, please come.
Let's go.
I just want to verify with you. A person doesn't have to be at the meeting to vote. They can come in at 8 o'clock and vote.
Yes, so long as, when the meeting's gonna be called, it's called at 6:30. The moderator is planning on about a half an hour of discussion. That could go longer, or it could go shorter. Then there will be a short break, because they have to remove all of the tables where the selectmen and the budget committee will be sitting to set up for the actual vote. And then they will open the polls for at least an hour. So I would tell people 7:30 if it were me. If somebody wants to simply come, cast their ballot and leave, I would tell them to be here at 7:30, and they will safely be in the middle of when the polls are open.
Yeah, I wouldn't wait till 8 o'clock.
But I think they'll be open. I personally think they'll be open, but I don't want somebody to miss the opportunity to vote, believe it or not, even if they are against it. That's our process. That is our process. So. Okay. All right. Any other road business?
I don't, Rick.
So? Okay. Brad, anything?
No, not really. I don't know if you wanted to update them at all. We've been doing a lot of meter installations and stuff in town.
I'm still installing. New England Backflow was in today to do some on the upper part of Moultonville. Not getting a lot of response from the customers to call, to set up appointments. We're not getting very many. They only get 11 out of 50. New England Backflow.
You're doing it by road?
I am. That's how I'm doing it, yeah. I've just been knocking on doors myself, and that's how I've been getting most of them done. But I'd just like, we need more people to contact New England Backflow on the upper part of Moultonville.
Okay. Upper part of Moultonville Road. You folks live up to those folks who may be watching this, who live up there, please reach out to the water department and schedule. We're in the process of replacing meters, which will be much more accurate and therefore much more fair to you and us. Please contact the water department.
Do we have to seal those minutes?
Yeah.
No?
Could I make a comment on that?
Sure.
The contractor that was hired by you guys, showed up at my door today.
They
And-
knocked, didn't they? Yeah.
Huh?
They knocked on your door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is at the house. And I don't think we ever received anything to make the phone call at the house. I don't know how that was supposed to
It
work.
was sent out with your bill, you should have received it.
Okay, well, that's the wife that takes care of it. But she called me and she asked me if I knew anything about it, so she didn't know anything about it.
So it's a scapegoat, Joe.
Oh, yeah, but it's true.
It was supposed to be a notice in the bill.
Okay.
And again, you know, if anybody is at all, you know, listen, it can be in this day and age concerning if somebody that you don't know is coming, just knocks on your door and says, I'm here from the utility company. We read in here last week about, you know, a scam that's going on with people representing themselves to be members of the electric company and what they're doing. So, but please, if you live on Montville Road, it's pretty much the upper end right now, or are you doing the?
The upper end, I took the lower half and the offshoot, so, yeah.
Okay, so please reach out to the water department. We are trying to schedule with you a convenient time to replace the meter, so,
Yeah.
okay? You can go home and tell the big boss that they may be back.
Oh, no, they
Oh, they did.
took care of it.
Okay. Okay.
Hope the office is.
Joe, it's Karen.
She'll see it, she'll hear about it one way or the other.
Yeah, your wife wants to speak to you now.
You did that earlier.
Okay. New business. We got on here for the 2018 budget review.
I think we're done with the operating budget portion of it. We'll just have to pull together the estimated revenues and start discussion on warrant articles, so that's about where we're at.
All right. Budget committee didn't meet this last week.
They are meeting tomorrow.
The meeting tomorrow night.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday,
Correct.
yes, sorry.
Sorry, tomorrow night's town meeting. Wednesday night is budget committee meeting, 6:30. That's at the Freight House. Other public input. Ed?
In regards to accurate public information, I encourage people to come into this meeting, sorry, my back's deep,
That's it.
to come to the meeting and make public comment about what your actions are going to be in the newspaper. I mean, there's a human element with the newspaper. You have to look at both sides and put together a story. It's not always easy to balance it. But what's good about the camera and good about the public meeting is your comments will be in the public record, and you can hand that piece of paper with your note on it to Ellen. She can put it in the public minutes for permanent record, but there's also a camera here. So if anybody ever says, I never said that, or they said you said something you didn't say, you tell them go watch the tape. The owner of the Salmon Press, I believe, could also watch this, so he would have the accurate, but if you're not here to say it, nobody really knows what happens. And if you notice, I'm unbiased. If you go to GovernmentOversite.com, either the Facebook page or the group page or the website, there's no opinion. It's what happens here. There's no way, I don't have the special effects, software put in there so I can, change people's heads around and change what they're saying. And can't do that yet. I gotta watch it. My second comment is December 4th is your school board meeting. I would also encourage everybody to go to the school board meeting and make public comments. It goes again in the public record. There's obviously a concern about the transitional housing that may be coming into town. And that's another public forum, which should be this forum also, make a comment about how you feel about it. And the school board should also hear how you feel about it. They may not have any control over it, but there has to be better communication about all the aspects about that. So, we know how to educate ourselves on how to either prevent something or encourage something. And we have a new board out here that has where you can post meetings. I would also encourage, since no one ever seems to attend your school board meetings, and that's a very huge part of your bill, it would behoove everybody to go to their meetings. Because the school board also has the deliberative session meetings where you have to learn more about the budget, and you can have input on that budget at that deliberative session, but also at the school board meeting. If nobody's there, the school board doesn't know that you're for or against something. I mean, there's curriculum that you should how do I say this? There's curriculum that the school is using that parents and residents that pay the bills should know is being used. Parents should know it, and taxpayers know it. A lot of people pay taxes to the school, but they don't have kids in the school. But you still have a voice because you would pay the taxes. So I'm just encouraging people, please get involved. It's 7 o'clock, December 4th, and I would love to see that December 4th because the school board goes around to all the different district towns. Just so happens December 4th, they're in this town. So I'm encouraging each town to put it on their board if they have one, or their calendars, and make sure everybody knows that it's at Ossipee this time. It's nowhere else but Ossipee this month.
Is it at the school?
It's at the school. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
I will tell you that I have steered people continuously towards government oversight, and I have over the past, but more probably of late than normal, because some of the people who are pushing back against the town's plan have literally tried to cherry pick people's statements and then use them against you. I'll give you an example. One of the mailings that went out, it quotes me as saying that we were going to depend on the abutters to notify us about if there was a problem, and therefore we have no security plan. I've pointed people back to watch the meeting, listen to what was said, because that is not at all what was said. We have a police department which is ready, willing, and able to do routine patrols. I added that we would also depend on the abutters and the neighbors to let us know if something was going on. That is no different than you at your house, or you at your house, or me at my house. It is very hard for the police department to address a problem if they don't know about it. So, again, cherry pick what was said and then try to use it to your advantage. So I have steered several people back to watch the meetings, listen to exactly what was said. This plan, it has not changed but this much. And the only significant change was, and I still support, that initially we looked at using some revenue from the property to offset the cost of the bond. It was never a prerequisite, it was never required for the town to purchase it, but we looked at it. I believed it was the right thing to look at. I still believe it was worth looking at. And the feedback that we were getting consistently were from people who wanted the beach, they did not want to run a campground. Some are simply on philosophical, doesn't think the town should be in business, and that's fine. But anyway, we decided to clean it up and to make it a simple, fundamental question. Do you want a beach or don't you? And if you do, here's a great site, and this is what the cost is. We have proposed to take $200,000 out of our surplus. Some people refer to it as a rainy day fund, which currently stands at $1.147 million. We have proposed to take $200,000 out and to bond $1 million. Town meeting could very well decide to take more out of surplus and bond less. That'll be for them to decide. We are going to certainly advise them not to take the surplus below $700,000, because that is at the area and the level that DRA recommends that we should be at. So, but realistically, they could take $500,000 out of surplus without hurting us and bond less if that's what they choose to do. So, anyway. Come to the meeting, learn the facts, make the decision, and then vote your conscience.
Any idea yet on what the interest rate would be?
They're giving us, for purposes of us planning, a 3% budget projection. It will, in their letter even, most likely be much less than that. They will be grouping, the bond bank, what they do is they group together a bunch of projects. There's about $15 million in projects by several towns which will be pooled together, and then they will put it out as a block. And by putting it out as a block, they get a much better interest rate and maybe a bigger group of potential investors that would look at. So it's about $15 million worth of bond that they're going to put out, of which Ossipee's is a part. So we reap the benefits, so to speak, by joining with those other towns on getting a better rate. But for purposes of planning, it's at 3%. one of the things that was being put out, and again, we've tried to be very transparent with this. In initial numbers, we were looking at about an $85,000 a year payment. People start to do the math, and then they go, oh my God, we're gonna spend $2.5 million for this $1 million piece of property. Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, with the revised rates, even at 3%, the payments would start off at $79,000 and actually would go down to about $50,000 a year in the course of the loan, because the way the bond bank sets it up is your principal is the exact same year after year after year after year. So it's not like a traditional mortgage where you're paying your interest up front. So the principal is the same every year, so it would go down by, say, $50,000 a year. And so for that reason, you don't pay anywhere near the interest that you would pay on a traditional mortgage. With the latest figure, even bonding the $1 million, not taking more at a surplus, the total cost is $1,319,000. So it'd be $300,000 in interest over the course of a 20-year note. So significantly less than what it was when we looked at it before. That number would be even better if they decide to take more out of surplus. In either way, the fact of the matter is, and you know, do the math, please do the math. The town of Ossipee financially is in a position to afford this purchase without raising taxes. A $70,000 a year payment sounds like an awful lot of money to you and to I. You need to think about it in the context of a $5.3 million operating budget that this town has. It's not a blip. That $70,000 can be absorbed into our budget in the sense that, as we have done over the last 4 years, even though we have continued to do major projects, and yes, the budget each year went up, it went up at a slower rate than our revenues, and consequently, we've cut the town portion of the tax rate 4 years in a row. We can continue that. We've proven it. Don't judge us on just what we say, judge us on what we've done. Right. We can do it, and we can do it without people's taxes going up. Will the county go up? Will the state go up? Will the school go up? Historically, the answer to that is yes. Look at your tax bill and look at where we're saving and look at whose rate is going down. So, anyway.
On a separate subject, I'd like to thank Brad for reaching out to the DOT regarding the islands down at the bottom of Folsom and Grant Hill. Didn't quite get the response that we were hoping for. One is the fact that they're Y intersections, which are wildly outdated, and they're trying to do away with those in the state, though I don't think there's any monies there to see that change anytime soon. That is probably in their works. The suggestion by them was to add the blue advertising signs that you see out on Route 16. I was really hoping for a little more character than a blue and white sign that you'd see on a highway. I'm hoping that maybe the board would be interested in furthering discussions and figuring out what we could really do to give the businesses up here a better face than a blue and white sign.
I agree. And the state there's got to be, listen, I mean, yes, that's a state road, but the state has never objected to the garden club planting flowers. You know, I mean, they've allowed the town to utilize that space. I would be very surprised if we can't get them to agree to let us put them up. Now, I don't think, we weren't asking them to put them up, to let us put them up. Much like we finally, and it took an awful lot of browbeating, we finally got them to concede that they, on the check your blinking sign down on 28, I asked them not, you know, we weren't asking them to pay for it, just asked them not to take it down if we put it up. And maybe that's the level of commitment that we can get down here.
What I get from it, I have to go back and digest it a little bit more, read it again. The concern is they have some RSAs against advertising. Not necessarily who pays to put up the signs, but the fact that there are some RSAs that there's an advertising RSA, I guess, that goes against that in a state right of way. The suggestion was those blue signs, you know, of course, in the state right of way, because those are regulated, Otherwise, we would have to find private property that would allow us to do it by letter, and then, of course, we would have to be set back beyond the state right-of-way, which it'd practically be in the woods. So I think we're gonna need to get a little creative on this and figure out what we can do, but I do wanna continue that.
Absolutely.
Along.
I'm only one, but I presume that there's no opposition. I mean, we would love to be a part of the solution. Let us know what it is you think that we can do. And as well as with Brad, I mean, if there's something, you know, there's one thing I learned in working with state government for the last 30 years, is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if you don't, they're moved on to somebody else. They're moved on to somebody else. So, absolutely. I think that, you know, I think what you have proposed, which is to somewhat ornate, but certainly more aesthetically pleasing sign to direct people up into the village, is to everybody's benefit. So,
Now, Brad, why was the town responsible for replacing the granite curbing at those Y intersections?
Well, there was nothing there before anyway. They were just kind of mounted up there, so we approached them to get permission to make them a little bit safer for the garden club. They had talked about, it came about by the one down in Ossipee Village was the worst one, because that was made out of railroad ties and it was falling apart. So they were having an issue of like climbing up on at the garden club and having those give way and stuff. There was become a safety factor. So we approached Division 3 on, possibly replacing that with the granite thing. Then I had the idea, well, why don't we do the two down here too? They do some work on. And there was a little type of different granite there. We used a slope curb there because they weren't as elevated as the one down in Ossipee Village. They agreed to all of them, so that's how that all came about.
no, I guess we'll keep working on it.
Maybe they'll deed those little islands to us or something, and that'd be town property.
Well, it does bring up that conversation of, we had just had our EDC meeting last week, and a question I have is, does the state have different regulations regarding their roads versus a town and its ordinances and our roads? And the conversation that brought that up was, if we're having the internal conversation whether or not we want to take over these roads, Folsom and Grand Hill, or Main Street. And if we look into the future, yes, we may not want to have those roads. There are certainly some opposition out there. But if we look into the future, is there benefit to taking those roads over? And one, it's funny, this letter came to me from Brad and the NHDOT, is if we were to take over those roads, the new question becomes, would we then be able to do what we need to do with that intersection?
And the answer is yes. Flat out, because one of the problems that has happened, and I mean, using this check your blinker sign down on Route 28, this is no exaggeration. I lobbied for 15 years to get that sign down there. And it never happened, because they are much more regimented in the sense that they take their cues from the federal government on the National Highway Safety as to what are approved signs and what are not approved signs, and their location and their placement, and they're very, very regimented in that. So the quick answer is, you're absolutely right. I mean, if that were a town-owned road, we would simply say, show us what you want to put up and put them up. I mean, it literally can happen that quickly. We're not governed at all on town roads by the state rules that they have on placement of signs and directional signs, and we're not governed by any of it.
I figured as much.
Not governed by any of it.
And that's part of again, plugging the Envision Night, January 8th, is that we want to have that discussion with town residents in the community. I designed the poster today. You'll start seeing that out in the newspapers soon. And it's really, the underline of this is, what do you want your community to look like? And then that way we can start molding this ball of clay into what it is our community wants. I've heard from a lot of people that they want certain things, but I think you say it a lot. Don't listen to the words, look at the actions, and there isn't a lot right now, and we need to get the ball rolling. I always talk about packing the snowball. We're packing the snowball. Pretty soon we'll start rolling it and making it bigger, but we got to get it going somewhere.
This town has changed a lot, and it's moved an awful lot in the right direction in my mind. And it's taken years and years and years. You've heard me, chagrin the master plan, because every town has one, and they're required by statute, and they spend all kinds of money and all kinds of time, and they develop this master plan, and then nobody ever follows
Does
it.
anything.
They do nothing.
Right, nothing.
They literally do nothing. I mean, I participated in the rewrite of several of them when I was police chief, and there was never used to develop a capital improvement plan. There was never any time schedule put on how we're going to accomplish what. It was literally an exercise in futility. Every time they redid it, they'd come to me for recommendations on the police side, and I'd sit there, rolling my eyes, and I'd give them to them, knowing full right well that nobody'd ever read them, and they didn't. And they literally didn't. So it is frustrating, but I also look back, and for those of us who have been around a while, and I don't want to belabor this whole thing with the beach, but growing up here, literally, I've used a couple of examples that if you wanted to participate in a fishing derby, you had to go to Wolfboro or Tuftonboro. If you wanted to see fireworks on the 4th of July, you had to go to Tamworth or Conway or Wolfboro. The town of Ossipee had fireworks just once before Old Home Week was formed, and that was during the town's bicentennial in 1985, and they put them up over the lake, and none of the townspeople got to see them unless they drove up in the Ossipee Mountains and looked down on the lake. Now that sounds ironically funny, but that's truly what it was. Now, over the years, a lot of things have changed. We now have a couple of fishing derbies, and we do have fireworks, and we have a really good parade on the 4th of July. All of that has come through the hard work of a whole lot of people who simply weren't satisfied with the status quo. Now, whether it's sidewalks or taking over roads or a town beach, there's room for disagreement and agreement on what the best course is. But at the end of the day, I hope that everybody would agree, no matter what your feelings are about a particular issue, that we're all trying to leave something better than when we found it. And if the day that stops, we're all in trouble. We're all in trouble.
To add to that, with the master plan, I think when I started the Economic Development Council 18-ish months ago, I went around to everywhere I could to find resources, just to see what the town had done in the past. I carry with me the master plan, a charrette that was done 10 years ago, and a whole bunch of other things. Now the sidewalk proposal from years back. What I'd like to see, and I think what you will see, is the Economic Development Council, once that master plan is put back in place after the zoning corrections and what have you, the EDC is what's going to hold people accountable for a good portion of that, because I feel as though we're very vested in what this community needs to look like, and hopefully will not only be a sounding board for entrepreneurs and businesses coming into town, but also the community to listen to them and be a sounding board for them to give the town what they want when they need it.
It's not about your attention bid, but what we've got to get away from is compiling this report, and it finally gets finalized, and then it goes onto a shelf, and people say, phew, we don't have to do that again for 10 more years, which is literally what has been going on for years and years and years. A true master plan can be a tremendous planning tool, not only on your zoning and your planning side, but on the development of a capital improvement plan, about things like we're just talking about. These are the 6 or 8 things that we want to work on, and this is a viable time schedule and a mechanism by how we're going to get there. It can be a tremendous tool. And I say can be because historically it has not been used as one. And I hope you're right. I hope that whoever is sitting here, when we're gone, grabs that and runs with it, because it needs to be. Much like we do with the roads, right now we have a list of roads that we want to pave and to improve. And we keep plugging away at them with a plan. I mean, we had a plan on bridges, so we had a whole bunch of red listed bridges, and we had as many as any other town does. And we had a plan, and we had a list, and we've been picking away at it to the point where they're done. I mean, it can work. It takes somebody.
It takes time, and it takes focus. I own several businesses, even ones outside of here in Ossipee, and I've never started one without a business plan. And that is the equivalent in a municipality as far as a vision. You need to have that vision, and you know we're going to be sticklers with it once it's in place. And we can take note, and the next time it comes up, we can make those corrections that need to be made in 10 years or 15 years or whenever that time seems to come.
You read the last one, I think.
Yeah?
It was heavy in one direction, and it wasn't very well balanced, and there really wasn't anything to follow.
It's not symbiotic. It's a bunch of people that wrote things to put it all together to get the job done, as Rick said.
Yeah, and it's very heavily weighted in one direction, and that's where the problem is. You need to write a master plan that's balanced for everybody, for businesses, for people, for families, for the school, for activities, all well-rounded. And so you get people that have an agenda and want one thing in there, and that's what happens, and that's what happened last time. So I'm hoping that you people will be involved with that when the process comes up. But we need to be very careful about who we pick to start the committee and to start the master plan itself.
As you know, it's on the planning board.
I know that. I understand that, but once again, I
And I'm not,
reiterate it.
and I'm not going anymore, and you're scared either.
We need to be very careful about who we choose.
No, he runs a meeting.
Well, the moment
That's
that
the worst
comes
thing.
back into play, you'll see me at those meetings a lot more. As I've told Chairman Connie about that.
The first part is picking who's going to be part and parcel
Yep,
of writing this, and that needs to be taken heavily into consideration.
absolutely.
Well, the problem with the master plan is that it's based on the zoning, and the zoning is based on residential, not business. You look at
That's true in part, but with the master plan, the true design of the master plan is to look at where you are and where you would like to be, and then the steps necessary to get there. That's the part that we've never done. I mean, it doesn't take much to compile what they did in the current master plan, is to compile where you are currently. Well, hell, all you gotta do is reduce it to paper. The trick to the master plan is to develop that vision of where it is you want to be, and then actually take some steps to utilize the information to get there. That's what has never been done, at least not in the, I've been involved in town government now for more than 30 years, and it's never been done. And
We've got to leave for Rotary.
see you tomorrow night,
See you tomorrow night.
with bells on.
I'm going to leave this with Ellen.
Thank you.
Not what I would do. 2 pages.
So, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, you do.
Anybody have anything else under public input?
And I'll be glad to help pass it out.
We have no need for public, non-public. So we got town meeting tomorrow night, 6:30 here, and budget committee Wednesday night, 6:30 at the Freight House. And if there's nothing else, I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
At least I still have, at least I admit it.